Hello, is this a halberd, a poleaxe, or is it a lovely ornamental banister with an axe head stuck to the end of it? I don't know, but it's great for hitting things with. This is sold as a Landsknecht halberd. It's made by Windlass, as you can see on the bottom here. I bought it from Southern Swords, first time I've used them. They're perfectly good. No reason not to use them again. There was a little bit of difficulty over delivery times, a little bit of confusion when I tried to get some information from them, but nothing serious. No reason not to use them again. Now, they called it the Landsknecht halberd. The Landsknecht were a group of German mercenaries who operated between the late 15th century and the early 17th century, largely for the Holy Roman German Order. They were very effective. They were mercenaries, and of course that means they required payment to work for you at all, but they were well equipped, they were experienced, so they weren't just like the sort of ragtag bands of mercenaries you sometimes imagine being involved in warfare. This was meant for fighting armoured opponents, and its purpose was really for one heavily armoured man to use against another heavily armoured man. And the reason for that is it's well versed to trying to get into armour, especially with this beak, and the spike would be used very likely for either penetrating chainmail, or perhaps if you could get into the right position or get them down onto the ground to try to find some gaps in the plates and to pierce the chainmail. The axe head is a little bit more difficult to explain because it wouldn't be often that useful against somebody wearing plate armour, and I think you might do well to have one with a beak and a hammer. You get types of axes designed like that, but I have not yet seen any poleaxes that are designed like that. Essentially, it's a large can opener for men who are wearing plate armour. It's a little bit short for a poleaxe. When I've seen illustrations of poleaxes, they often have the head start about neck height. Of course, a lot of the older illustrations were featuring people who would be a lot shorter than humans today. You can also see halberds, you can see poleaxes made in contemporary times that tend to be a little bit longer than this. It doesn't mean it wouldn't be very effective. It doesn't mean it's not worth having. I don't think it's as authentic as you might want it to be. I wanted a poleaxe, and I found a blacksmith in the north of England who makes them. They're very ornate, same kind of design, but with lovely etching around here. Some of them are really ornate. They are to hang on the wall in a rather well furnished house. They're not for hitting things with in your back garden. I wanted one, and on his website he says the price starts at £500, and then of course the more you have done to them, the more the price will go up. I contacted him, and I'd have paid £500 for one, maybe £600 to just select some of the elaborate designs. And he replied, quite a quick email. Sometimes you can tell people aren't that interested in the work. And he said, poleaxes start at £800. That's a bit too much for me. I found this. Previously, I'd found just the heads. Cold Steel make one. A few other people make them. I think Get Dressed for Battle make one, and they look a little bit too flimsy for me, especially the Cold Steel one. This is solid. You can see a solid piece of steel here. I don't know if there's any kind of a shaft or any kind of a socket arrangement up here. I'd like to know, but I'm not going to take the peening off and look into that. Not at this point in time anyway. If it's only secured by these metal brackets down the side, I don't know how much punishment it would stand up to. Doesn't really matter when it's not for authentic use, but like with swords, if I'm going to buy something that's a piece of medieval equipment, I like to at least think it's likely to stand up to some of the punishment it would have taken if it was really in use. A problem with it being too short is you lose one of the advantages, and that's why I have this here, a spear. Now this isn't particularly long as spears go. Shafts well over 6 foot aren't unknown. When you're using the spear, you have such an advantage of range that somebody who's got a shorter weapon, unless they've also got the defense of a shield, probably doesn't have a lot of a chance against you. They do lots of tests in HEMA. Now then, because this is a YouTube channel that has different subjects, you might be watching this and you don't know about HEMA. That's HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts, and it's a growing hobby, a growing sport. People wear protective equipment and they train in it, and they train very hard. But you can't do it with sharp weaponry, although this isn't sharp, the edge isn't sharp, still rather sharp at the end. If you were using this in HEMA, you'd cut it off short and file it down. But it's still dangerous. You still have very serious protective equipment because there's a lot of ways to damage yourself when you're hitting each other with pieces of metal that doesn't necessarily involve a sharp edge. Through experimentation in HEMA, people have found out that you stand very little chance if you've got a sword against a spear. And of course, the range advantage of the spear is obvious. That said, if you were an unarmed man fighting an unarmed man with a sword and you have a poleaxe, you may well have a disadvantage because this is so much more maneuverable. You can position it, you can move yourself around, and you can look for openings, and you might just get in there quickly and be able to close an attack before whoever's holding the poleaxe can bring it to bear to protect themselves. There's in treatises of use of poleaxe, we see people, and in illustrations, using them to fend off. So it's not just an offensive weapon. But I think it's fair to say if two men were unarmed, one had this and one had a sword, the person with a sword has a serious advantage. You can think of it a bit similar to unarmed combat. If somebody's chambering a kick and the person in front of them sees that, is able to respond to it and quickly get in there with a punch before they can kick, then they have quite an advantage. And it's a similar thing. You're going to see what somebody plans to do with a poleaxe quite easily, whereas with a sword, you can hold it in a guard and you could be moving in a number of ways and it won't be too obvious to your opponent. So, with this being a bit too short, it loses one of the advantages of a pole weapon, but they wouldn't be as long as a spear. I think that's just because they'll become too heavy after a while. I mentioned this being rather ornate, a bit like a banister. I was just surprised to find it's nicely varnished, it's nicely smooth. Now that's very good for sliding your hands up and down, stop you getting a splinter. But if you're using one of these in the original times, you'd be wearing gauntlets or at least leather gloves anyway. I don't think it would look quite like this, but there's certainly no harm. It's hardwood, as far as I can tell, and it's pretty solid. No spike on the end. You'd often get a spike on the end. And sometimes, I understand, in the treatises you'll see particular techniques that take advantage of that. It's not difficult to imagine why. If you swing at somebody, you could find yourself, if you really swing far, disadvantaged, and then you have to pull around, and the rear is the easiest to bring to bear. I don't know how often that would happen. I can't imagine you deciding to use this end over this end because there's too much advantage if somebody tries to hold this. If you want to try to attack but with a thrust and then turn that into a chop, then you can do that. And you can even, if you thrust at somebody, you miss them, then you can hook them from behind and use the hook to drag their limb, perhaps even to get in between the protection of the plates. So I find it difficult to think that a person would choose to do that. Unless perhaps you wanted to thrust, put somebody off their guard, and then make an attack with their head. Now, despite it being a little short, I'm happy to have it. I paid £200 for it. Now I see they've got them for £165. Could mean there's just one or two more in stock and they want to get them out of stock. It's not perfect. not perfectly symmetrical in the way it's assembled. I think Windlass make this, and it's possible that the Southern Swords put it on the shaft. I don't mind paying a bit more for it to be mounted on the shaft. Still haven't fully mounted my spear yet, so I don't really want to get involved with another construction project at the moment. I was told when I emailed them that it's 1060 steel. Seems pretty tough. I've hit a few things with it. Biggest drawback is this. It's a bit too long, nearly a foot, and it makes it a little bit too thin. Now, if it was stainless steel, you'd know about it, you'd bend it a lot further than that. But when I tested this a little bit the other day on an old log, I didn't want to push too hard. I think this could break if you're going into a tree. Maybe a tough wooden shield. This, I think, in an authentic version would be thicker. It's about 4 millimeters. I think you'd be looking for it to be thicker than that with a slightly different section in the center. But again, for £200, it's nice to have. It's ornamental. You could certainly put this on the wall, and it's nice to use to get a feel for how a poleaxe would handle what you do with one. And I think it's worth buying. I would like a more, I can't say it's more authentic, but I would like the other type of poleaxe with a square blade here and a hammer on the back. But I don't think I'm going to be using this for anything practical anytime soon, so it doesn't really matter. This is supposed to be a quick video. I should cut it short now. One thing I've learned, making my 5th video now, and you've probably learned too, is I can ramble on quite easily given the chance. You don't ever want to see me when I'm drunk in a pub. Then you'll find out how far it can go. I think that's really it. If you want one, consider buying one. I haven't found anything bad about it. It certainly doesn't feel loose. And I didn't bring anything down here to hit it with. So I'm going to leave it at that. And then I'll go and get something and take a few strikes before ending the video. And I'll just say cheers, thank you for watching. Got some more exercise related things coming up and a little bit of lifting soon, and I think it'll be about the right time for me to make a video so people can find out how strong I am, what I'm capable of lifting, and then we'll see how far a 49-year-old can go to increase his strength, even though I'm well into the part of life when your ability to produce testosterone and increase muscle mass is reduced. Okay, cheers.